The dimly lit room flickered with the faint glow of subdued flames, their light barely piercing through the oppressive darkness. As the view expanded, several shadowy figures could be made out in the gloom. One of them sat behind a round table, their body concealed by a large black robe, from which a dark and eerie aura slowly emanated. The atmosphere in the room was stifling. After a long silence, the seated figure extended their sleeve, revealing a pale hand that gently tapped the table. "The fiery crystal ape king is dead?" A hoarse and indifferent voice emerged from beneath the black robe. And all the demon apes were wiped out as well, not a single one left. It seems it was the work of those Dao Sect disciples. When did they become so ruthless? Another shadow shifted in the room, speaking in a low, grave tone. "For Dao Sect disciples arrived 2 days ago. It's likely they had something to do with it. Then it seems they've also discovered the immortal essence ancient tree." The shadowed figure paused for a moment before speaking again in a raspy voice. "Boss, should we act? With the strength of the Dao Sect disciples guarding that or vein, it would be easy for us to take the immortal essence ancient tree," one of the shadowy figures asked. "If it were any other faction, we could act without hesitation. But this is the Dao Sect. If we can't be sure that the immortal essence ancient tree holds seeds, it's not worth the risk. A few immortal essence ancient fruits are valuable, but they're not worth provoking the Dao Sect's wrath." The leader of the group waved his pale hand dismissively. "Wait a few days. If the tree really has seeds, there will be a noticeable commotion. In the meantime, send people to monitor the area around the mine closely." "And if the immortal essence ancient tree does hold seeds?" another person asked quietly. "If it has seeds," the leader of the shadowy figures leaned forward slightly, his black robe lifting to reveal a ghastly pale face. A sinister smile spread across his lips as he hissed, "Then it will be their bad luck. Anyone who tries to stop us will be killed. If we manage to get the seeds and hand them over to the Yuan sect, my past offenses will be forgiven. By then, even if the Dao sect is furious, what can they do? Are they really bold enough to challenge the Yuan sect?" The bloodthirsty intent spreading across the leader's face caused the other shadowy figures in the room to shudder briefly. Then, they all grinned viciously. Sunlight filtered through the forest canopy, breaking into scattered patches of light that illuminated the figures seated below. One of these beams landed on Lin Dong's face, causing his half-closed eyes to open. His gaze shifted to the black tree ahead, where 5 crimson fruits hung, glowing more vibrantly than ever, as if they were fully ripened. "It should be soon," Lin Dong murmured softly to himself. A faint stream of spiritual energy emerged from his Naiwan palace, spreading out to sense any disturbances in the forest. Through his spiritual perception, he could detect dozens of hidden presences, all of them disciples from the Dao sect, scattered throughout the forest. Further away, others were patrolling the area vigilantly. Suddenly, Lin Dong retracted his spiritual perception as a pair of delicate boots appeared on the ground before him. Startled, he looked up to seeing Huan Huan standing over him, her hands clasped behind her back, gazing down at him with lively eyes. Not far away, Jiang Kuan and Yuan Ling were conversing in low voices, though their eyes occasionally darted toward Lin Dong. However, their gazes lingered much longer on the girl in the white dress and green trousers. It was clear that both of them harbored feelings for her. "Your spiritual energy isn't bad," Huan Huan remarked with a bright smile, clearly aware of Lin Dong's spiritual surveillance of the area. Lin Dong offered a nonchalant smile, though inwardly, he was a bit surprised by her sharp intuition. His spiritual energy was always restrained, and it wasn't easy for anyone without a strong mastery of spiritual power to detect his probing. "I may primarily cultivate primordial energy, but my spiritual energy isn't too shabby. While not as strong as yours, I've passed through the wind and thunder calamity at least once," Huan Huan said with a smile, seeming to sense Lin Dong's curiosity. Lin Dong raised an eyebrow in mild surprise. He hadn't expected this young woman to be a dual cultivator of both primordial energy and spiritual energy. It made sense now why her zither music was so extraordinary. There was clearly spiritual energy involved. "Being cautious never hurts," Lin Dong replied softly, knowing that EngHuan understood the purpose of his spiritual probing. I thought this would be just another routine mission, but it turned out to be more complicated than I expected. EngHuan sat down next to Lin Dong, her gaze fixed on the black ancient tree. Then, she smiled and said, "But I actually prefer it this way. If we manage to obtain the seeds of the immortal essence ancient tree, it will be a tremendous boon for the Dao sect. Many disciples will benefit from it, and the Dao sect's strength will greatly increase." Lin Dong blinked at her words. There was no trace of greed on the girl's face as she spoke. Despite the immense value of the immortal essence ancient tree's seeds, her only thought was for her sect. Lin Dong pressed his lips together, his expression becoming slightly complex. He had clearly experienced far more than EngHuan. Over the years, his cautious nature had developed, and while he held a favorable impression of the Dao sect, his first thought upon learning of the immortal essence ancient tree's value hadn't been how to secure it for the sect. He might not have been much older than EngHuan, but his heart wasn't nearly as pure. Of course, if he still harbored that kind of innocence after all he had gone through, he probably wouldn't have made it this far. Seeing the sincere joy on the girl's face, Lin Dong couldn't help but smile. A sect that fostered such unity was truly powerful. The competition between super sects in the Eastern Mystery region is intense. If the Dao sect's strength increases, our fellow disciples will be better protected when they travel outside. EngHuan rested her delicate chin on her hand, her dark ponytail falling over her shoulder. Then, as if something suddenly came to mind, she threw a playful glance at Lin Dong. "You've got talent. If you had joined the Heaven Hall, your achievements would have been amazing. But I suppose you've done well enough in the Wild Hall, or else I wouldn't even bother talking to someone who makes such impulsive choices." Lin Dong chuckled, but didn't argue further. He now understood that back on the selection platform, EngHuan wasn't targeting him out of malice, but rather because she had been genuinely angry at what she saw as his reckless decision. He wasn't yet capable of prioritizing the sect like EngHuan did, but he respected her devotion. "Rest assured, if the immortal essence ancient tree does have seeds, we will definitely bring them back," Lin Dong said softly. EngHuan smiled, her radiant expression captivating, and then she pressed her lips together and nodded firmly. "Heh, what are you two chatting about over here?" Jiang Kuan and Yuan Ling finally approached, but beneath their seemingly casual words, there was a hint of jealousy that made Lin Dong chuckle inwardly. Just as he was about to speak, his expression suddenly changed, and he quickly raised his head, his gaze locked onto the immortal essence ancient tree. At that moment, the 5 fruits hanging from it began to tremble slightly. "The fruits are ripening." EngHuan and the others quickly sensed it as well, and their faces lit up with a mixture of excitement and tension. Lin Dong's eyes focused intently on the immortal essence ancient tree as waves of powerful energy fluctuations rippled outward from it, causing even the ground to tremble slightly. Buzz, buzz. The 5 crimson fruits trembled more violently, and in the next instant, they suddenly shook free from the tree and fell. With a wave of his hand, Lin Dong unleashed a suction force, swiftly pulling the 5 immortal essence ancient fruits into his grasp. However, there was no time to divide them now, as everyone's attention remained fixed on the immortal essence ancient tree. Even after the fruits had fallen, the energy radiating from the tree showed no sign of weakening. A dense green light began to spread from its roots, and at the same time, a strong surge of life energy seemed to emanate from within. Sensing this movement, a wave of joy flickered in EngHuan's eyes and those of her companions. Buzz. The immortal essence ancient tree trembled again, and suddenly, a small point of green light emerged from its trunk. The intense vitality was clearly coming from this single point of green light. Immortal essence ancient seed. Jiang Kuan's voice rang out, filled with ecstatic excitement. Lin Dong's gaze was locked onto that peculiar green light, and in the next moment, his pupils suddenly contracted. As his eyes narrowed, the immortal essence ancient tree quivered violently, and a massive beam of green light shot out from the top of the tree, piercing through the forest and directly into the sky. Lin Dong's face darkened as he watched this development. The pillar of green light pierced through the forest, disappearing into the clouds, and then, like a giant green dome, It spread across the sky, its movement clearly visible for miles in every direction. Lin Dong's expression grew somber as he stared at the sight, taking a deep breath. It seemed that quietly bringing the immortal essence ancient seed back to the Dao sect was no longer an option. Beside him, the joy that had graced Huan and the others' faces quickly faded, and a trace of anxiety flashed through their eyes. Whoosh! From within the forest, Yuan Fong, having been alerted by the commotion, quickly arrived with a dozen disciples. Upon seeing the expressions on their faces, she sighed softly. Has the message been sent? Lin Dong swiftly composed himself and asked in a low voice. It should have reached them by now, but reinforcements, even if they hurry, won't arrive until tomorrow, Yuan Fong replied with a bitter smile, pausing for a moment before continuing. And there's more bad news. Earlier, we spotted some figures lurking around the mine. If I'm not mistaken, they belong to the Demon Seal Legion. Demon Seal Legion? Huan and the others' faces changed instantly at the mention of the name. What's that? Lin Dong frowned and asked. A notorious force in the Bloodstone territory. Their leader, Yao Ling, ranks 4th on the sect's wanted list, and his strength has reached the 9th Nirvana stage, Huan said, biting her lip. The 9th Nirvana stage. Lin Dong's expression shifted slightly upon hearing this. It was no wonder the Eastern Mystery region was so dangerous. Even random encounters with thugs revealed such powerful opponents. Yao Ling was once an enforcer for the Yuan sect, but after committing a grave offense, he was expelled. However, due to his background, the Yuan sect's enforcement team has been lax in pursuing him. He's been operating in the Bloodstone territory for years and has made quite a name for himself, Yuan Fong added. I didn't expect we'd catch the attention of these scoundrels, Jiang Kuan muttered angrily. There are 3 cities within 100 miles of our mining site, all filled with a mix of shady characters. With this much commotion, we're bound to draw a lot of attention. If word of the immortal essence ancient seed spreads, Yuan Fong trailed off, her face growing increasingly grim. Let's collect the seed, Lin Dong said, his brow furrowed. Huan nodded without hesitation. She quickly stepped forward, reaching into the green pillar of light with her delicate hand and grasping the brightest point within. As she withdrew her hand, the towering green pillar gradually faded away, and Lin Dong's gaze shifted to the seed. In Huan's palm lay a perfectly round, jade-green seed, its surface adorned with naturally formed runes. From within the seed, an astonishing amount of vitality constantly surged. So this is the immortal essence ancient seed, Lin Dong muttered, casting a glance at the black tree. Now that the seed had been removed, the verdant glow that had once enveloped the tree's trunk rapidly dissipated, and the vitality within it diminished significantly. The tree's black trunk, like forged black iron, stood rigid, its branches extending like cold, metallic limbs. A sense of ancient, icy strength emanated from it. Lin Dong's eyes flickered as he extended his hand to touch the tree's cold surface. As soon as his hand made contact with the trunk, he felt his primordial energy slow down, as if it was being suppressed. This sudden sensation made his heart jolt slightly. The trunk of the immortal essence ancient tree has the unique ability to suppress all forms of energy. Only by holding it at the root can one avoid the suppression. However, it's incredibly heavy, so much so that even cultivators who specialize in physical strength find it hard to move, Huan explained, sensing Lin Dong's thoughts. Oh! Lin Dong raised an eyebrow in response. Stepping forward, he slammed his foot into the ground, causing the earth to crack open and reveal the tree's gnarled black roots below. Bending down, Lin Dong reached out and grabbed hold of the largest of the black roots. The moment he made contact, a chilling coldness and ancient pressure seeped into his hand. It's incredibly heavy. Lin Dong tugged with all his might, but to his surprise, despite his immense strength, the immortal essence ancient tree didn't budge. However, this only piqued Lin Dong's interest further. His hand tightened into a fist, and the muscles in his arm bulged, veins throbbing as faint traces of azure dragon scales appeared. A surge of tremendous power burst forth from within him. Boom! Under Lin Dong's dragon-like strength, The enormous immortal essence ancient tree, standing several feet tall, was uprooted from the ground, much to the astonishment of Huan and the others. Whoosh! Lin Dong grasped the tree by its roots and swung it, the force of his motion splitting the air. The invisible power ripped open a massive fissure several feet wide in the ground before him. What a remarkable thing! Seeing the sheer force behind the tree, Lin Dong couldn't help but grin. With a swift motion of his hand, he unceremoniously stowed the immortal essence ancient tree into his Qinkuan bag. Raising his head, he noticed Huan and the others staring at him with strange expressions. Despite Lin Dong's thick skin, he couldn't help but flush slightly. He cleared his throat and was just about to speak when his expression abruptly changed. Looking up slowly, he muttered, "Trouble's coming." As soon as he spoke, Lin Dong's figure shot into the sky, bursting through the forest canopy. His eyes scanned the surroundings before stopping at a distant spot in midair. There, more than a dozen shadowy figures hovered silently. Beneath their black robes, cold and sinister gazes locked onto them. Swoosh! Swoosh! Below, the forest stirred as Huan, Jiang Kuan, and the others swiftly followed Lin Dong into the air, their eyes also turning toward the figures ahead. The Demon Seal Legion. It really is those bastards. Yuan Fang's gaze darkened as she glared at the shadowy figures, gritting her teeth. There are others heading this way too, likely strong individuals and factions who were drawn here by the commotion, Lin Dong said, extending his spiritual energy. He let out a deep breath, sensing faint sounds of wind breaking from the distant horizon. Weak yet continuous presences began to emerge one after another. From below, more Dao Sect disciples were arriving one after another, their numbers growing to over 100. However, Lin Dong knew that if word about the immortal essence ancient seed spread, it would be difficult for them to hold the situation with just this group. Haha, Yuan Fang, some things can't be hidden. Hand over the immortal essence ancient seed quietly, or I'm afraid this place will be soaked in blood today. At the front of the shadowy figures, one man pulled back his black robe, revealing a sinister middle-aged face. He sneered as he stared at Yuan Fang. Sulei, you dare covet something that belongs to the Dao Sect? Yuan Fang's gaze was icy as she snapped back. Heh, once we get our hands on the immortal essence ancient seed, we can trade it with our boss and the Yuan Sect for a huge reward. What can your Dao Sect do about it? The man, Sulei, laughed coldly. That guy's the second in command of the Demon Seal Legion, Sulei, known as Thunderblade. He's at the 8th Nirvana stage, Huan whispered to Lin Dong. The Demon Seal Legion's core members include 6 people, all of whom are on the Sect's wanted list. Aside from Sulei, the others are also at the 7th Nirvana stage, she added. Their leader doesn't seem to be here, Lin Dong said, scanning the group of shadowy figures. He's extremely cunning, but with such a large mobilization from the Demon Seal Legion, he's definitely hiding nearby, Huan replied. Lin Dong nodded quietly. He raised his head again, looking at the distant horizon, where a series of black dots were rapidly approaching. Moments later, the figures appeared in the sky, their suspicious gazes directed at Lin Dong and the others. As more and more powerful individuals arrived, Lin Dong's heart grew heavier. The situation was becoming increasingly precarious. The sound of rushing wind echoed above the mine, and Lin Dong and the others soon saw figures with imposing auras arriving one after another, hovering in the sky. Lin Dong's eyes grew more serious as he observed these newcomers. From the pressure radiating from them, it was clear that these weren't ordinary individuals. This is going to be trouble. Yuan Fang's face darkened as more people arrived. She bit her lip and whispered, "Look toward the northern sky. The man in green over there is Shao Tian, known as the Devouring Demon Hand. He's ranked 5th on the Sect's wanted list, with strength at the 8th Nirvana stage." Lin Dong followed her gaze and spotted a figure in green. The man appeared to be in his 30s, tall and somewhat handsome, but there was a faint aura of evil around him. He stood with his hands behind his back, his eyes locking onto them with suspicion. The man in white in the southern sky is Luo Yi, known as the Butcher, ranked 6th on the Sect's wanted list. He's also at the 8th Nirvana stage. Lin Dong shifted his gaze southward and was slightly startled. There, he saw a man in white, who looked rather refined, with a pale face. His appearance didn't match his moniker at all, but Lin Dong knew better than to judge by looks. Though the white-clothed man wore a gentle smile, Lin Dong could sense a faint trace of bloodlust from his body. Clearly, this man was a ruthless individual. There are other people too, all of whom have some reputation in the Bloodstone territory, Yuan Fong said bitterly. It was clear that getting out of this situation smoothly was going to be difficult. Lin Dong sighed inwardly, though he didn't panic. Over the years, he had been through countless perilous situations. While this was certainly dangerous, forcing him into a dead end wasn't going to be an easy task. As Lin Dong's thoughts raced, he suddenly felt a cold, smooth object being pressed into his palm. Startled, he looked down just as Eng Huanhuan's delicate face appeared in front of him. Lin Dong, no matter what happens, you must get the seed back, Eng Huanhuan said, biting her lip. Her face, usually so youthful, now carried a surprising determination far beyond her years. She clearly understood the gravity of the situation. Lin Dong frowned slightly but didn't say much. He quietly placed the seed into his Qinkuan bag and said softly, "Don't worry, it won't come to that. And even if it does, you're not the one who should be handling this." Hee, could someone explain what's happening here? And what was that green light earlier? Just as Lin Dong finished speaking, a voice called out from the distance. It was Luo Yi, the white-robed butcher, who gazed at Yuan Fong and the others with a playful smile. Yuan Fong's face changed, but she didn't respond, clearly unwilling to divulge the secret of the immortal essence ancient seed. Haha, I hear it's the seed of an immortal essence ancient tree. However, before Yuan Fong could speak, Sulei from the Demon Seal Legion let out a sinister laugh. He didn't seem the least bit worried about the news spreading, as he was evidently confident in his group's strength. Yuan Fong's face turned pale with fury, her eyes blazing with anger. Oh! As soon as those words were spoken, the sky was filled with murmurs of astonishment. Many of the onlookers' eyes immediately filled with greed. One of them licked his lips and said, "Who would have thought there'd be such a treasure here?" Even Luo Yi was taken aback by the mention of the immortal essence ancient seed. A glimmer of intense interest flickered across his face as he fixed his gaze on Yuan Fong. "I've never seen an immortal essence ancient seed in my life. How about you take it out and show us?" Yuan Fong's expression turned icy, and just as she was about to speak, Lin Dong stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Luo Yi. Without saying a word, his spiritual energy surged outward like lightning, scanning the faces of everyone present in full view of the crowd. "What are you doing, kid?" Luo Yi was startled by Lin Dong's bold action, and his eyes turned cold as he shouted. Lin Dong ignored him. With a wave of his sleeve, the spiritual energy condensed into numerous light screens in front of him, each one depicting the faces of Luo Yi and the others. Then, Lin Dong flicked his sleeve again, sending out numerous jade stones that imprinted the faces onto them using his spiritual energy. With another motion, over 100 jade stones flew into the hands of the Dao Sect disciples below. "Everyone, no matter what happens today, as long as even one of you makes it back to the sect and hands these jade stones to the elders, I'm sure they'll know what to do." Lin Dong's deep voice echoed through the air, reaching everyone's ears. As his words fell, the expressions of those hovering in the sky began to shift. Their eyes flickered, caught between ferocity and hesitation. Lin Dong's move was ruthless. He had imprinted the faces of everyone present, using the Dao Sect as a deterrent. While most of the people here were no strangers to trouble, the Dao Sect was one of the 8 super sects, a dominant force in the Eastern Mystery region. If the wrath of the Dao Sect descended, few here would be able to bear it. "What a vicious little brat. But aren't you afraid we might go all out and massacre you lot?" Luo Yi's eyes twitched as he stared coldly at Lin Dong, a sneer forming on his face. "If you have the ability, then go ahead and try." Lin Dong stepped forward, his expression suddenly turning ferocious. A terrifyingly fierce aura surged from his body, causing even the hardened criminals in the crowd, many of whom had blood on their hands, to feel a shiver down their spines. How could a Dao sect disciple look even more ruthless than them? Yuan Fong, Huan, and the others exchanged glances, clearly noticing the hesitation in the expressions of their enemies. They secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the only way to deal with these ruthless types was to be even more ruthless. Times really are changing. A mere brat at the 5th Nirvana stage dares to be so arrogant in front of me? Have the Dao sect disciples all become so ignorant of the world? Luo Yi's pale face darkened with a sinister gleam, and his tone grew colder. Not far away, Sulei and the others from the Demon Seal Legion watched with cold smiles, showing no sign of intervening just yet. You lot have a bit of a reputation. Surely you won't be scared off by this kid, right? Luo Yi sneered, glancing around at the other figures in the sky. Hearing his words, some people frowned, their thoughts shifting. Just as they were about to make a move, the green-clad man known as Xiao Tian, the devouring demon hand, stepped forward. As someone ranked 5th on the sect's wanted list, Xiao Tian clearly commanded a great deal of influence. The moment he stepped out, many gazes shifted toward him, even Luo Yi's eyes narrowing slightly. Yuan Fong and the others looked on nervously. If Xiao Tian also decided to attack, the situation would become even more dire for them. You're Huan, right? Under the crowd's watchful eyes, Xiao Tian's gaze landed on Huan, and he spoke slowly. Huan's brows furrowed slightly, a look of confusion in her eyes. Clearly, she didn't recognize him. Normally, I'd be getting involved in something like this. But I owe your sister, Xiao, a favor, Xiao Tian said in a flat tone. Hearing this, Yuan Fong and the others let out a collective sigh of relief, while Luo Yi, Sulei, and the others frowned darkly. The immortal essence ancient seed is rare, but the Dao sect isn't a force to be trifled with. I'm not going to touch this thing. If you want it, go ahead and try, Xiao Tian said indifferently as he took a step back, clearly indicating that he had no intention of getting involved. Heh, even you, Xiao Tian, fear a super sect, Luo Yi sneered mockingly. Xiao Tian shot him a cold glance, his eyes flashing dangerously, but he didn't respond. Well, if you're too scared, I'll take over. I want to see what qualifies this arrogant brat to speak to me like that. Luo Yi took a step forward, pointing at Lin Dong with a mocking smile. Kid, if you can take 10 of my moves today, I'll step back. What do you say? Lin Dong stared at Luo Yi, a cold smirk gradually forming on his face. The crowd in the sky watched intently, and Luo Yi's expression darkened with a hint of killing intent. From his perspective, killing Lin Dong, who was only at the 5th Nirvana stage, would be as easy as flipping his hand. If you want to steal something, just do it. Stop wasting time with all this nonsense. Lin Dong's voice rang out coldly, his eyes locked on Luo Yi with a sneer. The air instantly buzzed with astonishment. Many people stared at Lin Dong in disbelief. How could a mere 5th Nirvana stage brat dare to talk to someone like Luo Yi, who had reached the 8th Nirvana stage, like that? Did he really think Luo Yi would hold back just because he was a Dao sect disciple? These Dao sect disciples are getting more arrogant by the day. Does that kid even know who Luo Yi is? Does he think the title of butcher is just for show? If Luo Yi gets angry, this won't end easily. Foolish kid, doesn't know his place? The sky buzzed with hushed, mocking voices. Many were pointing at Lin Dong, their faces filled with schadenfreude. Behind Lin Dong, Huan and the others exchanged glances. They knew Lin Dong wasn't the reckless type, so they assumed he had a plan in mind. But still, Luo Yi wasn't someone to be taken lightly. He was ranked 6th on the sect's wanted list, after all. In the midst of the murmurs, Luo Yi's already sinister face grew even darker, but instead of getting angry, he let out a chilling laugh. The sound of it sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. These days, there really are plenty of fools with no regard for their lives. Luo Yi grinned at Lin Dong, baring his white teeth. His pupils gleamed with a cruel light. Kid, if you can still say those words after what happens next, I'll truly admire your courage. Luo Yi's voice, laced with a sinister chuckle, echoed across the sky. An icy, murderous intent quietly spread through the air, making the very air around them seem colder. However, just as Luo Yi's voice fell, a vicious expression suddenly twisted his face, and with one step, his figure disappeared eerily. Lin Dong, be careful. The moment Luo Yi vanished, Huan, Jiang Kuan, and the others noticed, and their faces changed as they hurriedly shouted a warning. Suspended in midair, Lin Dong's spiritual energy instantly expanded outward. His pupils suddenly narrowed, and he shifted his body slightly to the left by half an inch. Swish! A hand, emanating a blood-red aura, slashed past Lin Dong's shoulder like the sharpest of blades, cutting off a strand of his hair. Humph! Luo Yi's figure reappeared after his missed strike, and with a cold sneer, he shifted his chopping motion into a slicing one, his hand cutting toward Lin Dong's throat like a blade. Bang! Just as Luo Yi's hand was about to strike Lin Dong's throat, Lin Dong's hand shot out, now covered in rapidly forming azure scales, and forcefully grabbed Luo Yi's hand. Zzz. A sharp, corrosive energy tried to bore into Lin Dong's palm, but when it met the layer of azure scales, it produced only a dazzling burst of sparks. Lin Dong's expression turned cold as he responded by surging a powerful force from his palm, the mighty desolation power, which began to erode Luo Yi's hand in return. Sizzle! Under the corrosion of the desolation power, the blood-red aura surrounding Luo Yi's hand started to wither and crack slightly. Desolation power? Humph! Do you think that's enough to deal with me? Luo Yi's eyes flickered for a moment, but then he sneered. With a thought, a torrent of violent primordial energy surged out of his body, shaking off the desolation power. Then, with a clench of his palm, the blood energy condensed into a serrated blade, which he swung down at Lin Dong's head with lightning speed. Luo Yi's attacks were vicious, each strike accompanied by an overwhelming blood aura, clearly showing his extensive battle experience. Lin Dong's eyes were ice-cold. He knew he couldn't match Luo Yi's overwhelming strength at the 8th Nirvana stage in a direct contest of power, so he had no intention of meeting force with force. His fingers flicked rapidly, sending out beams of azure light, which formed a series of azure scales that collided with the serrated blade. Clang! Clang! Sparks flew as the serrated blade hacked through the azure scales, shattering them one by one. But the slight obstruction gave Lin Dong enough time to retreat out of the blade's range. Boy, where did all your bravado from earlier go? Luo Yi's face grew increasingly sinister as his missed attack only fueled his cruel laughter. His mocking words were laced with malice. Lin Dong glanced at him, and his eyes gleamed with cold fury. The situation was becoming increasingly precarious for them. The onlookers all harbored some degree of greed for the immortal essence ancient seed, but the presence of the Dao sect kept them hesitating. If Lin Dong were to be defeated now, that hesitation might vanish, and greed would override reason, pushing these people to attack them. That would be the worst possible outcome, one that Lin Dong wanted to avoid at all costs. Over the years, he had experienced many dangerous situations and knew that the people here were ruthless killers. Even the slightest sign of weakness from him would turn them into a pack of wolves, ready to tear him apart and leave nothing behind. Showing weakness here was not an option, even if the opponent in front of him was ranked 6th on the sect's wanted list, a formidable foe. If you want to steal from me, you'd better be prepared to leave something behind. Lin Dong abruptly halted his retreat. His eyes flared with a fierce light as he took a deep breath and rapidly formed a series of hand seals. As his hand seals changed, a gray line reappeared at the center of his forehead, slowly splitting open. From within, a menacing demon eye emerged, radiating a terrifying aura. Whoosh! The moment the wild demon eye appeared, a gray beam of light shot out, heading straight for Luo Yi. Seeing the gray beam, the sinister grin on Luo Yi's face faltered for a moment. His eyes flashed with a deep sense of dread, realizing the immense threat it posed. Not bad, kid. Seems you have some skill after all. Luo Yi sneered. He gripped the serrated blade tightly and let out a low growl as a torrent of primordial energy surged from his body. With a furious slash, he brought the blade down. Whoosh! A massive, blood-red blade aura, at least 10 feet long and exuding a strong stench of blood, burst from the serrated blade, slashing down on the gray beam of light. The moment the two forces collided, a violent shockwave of energy swept out in all directions, drawing gasps of surprise from many onlookers. It was clear that no one had expected Lin Dong, at the 5th Nirvana stage, to launch such a powerful attack. Was it blocked? Lin Dong's eyes narrowed as he watched Luo Yi, who still held the serrated blade. This was the first time his wild demon eyes attack had been thwarted. The gap in their strength was clear. What a strange attack! Luo Yi, too, was shaken. Though he had shattered the strange gray beam, his hand still tingled slightly with numbness. This kid is dangerous. I need to end him quickly, Luo Yi thought, his eyes flicking to the demonic eye on Lin Dong's forehead. A sense of unease crept into his heart. Without hesitation, he roared as his figure shot forward, his 8th Nirvana stage power erupting fully, clearly intent on killing Lin Dong. Lin Dong retreat. Seeing Luo Yi's explosive charge, Jiang Kuan and the others turned pale and shouted anxiously. Although Lin Dong's wild demon eye was powerful, the gap between him and Luo Yi was simply too vast. A direct confrontation would likely spell disaster. But Lin Dong merely shook his head in response to their warnings. If he showed any sign of retreat now, the others still hesitating on the sidelines, torn between greed and caution, would lose their restraint. I'd like to see just how powerful someone at the 8th Nirvana stage really is. Lin Dong's eyes flashed with cold determination as his hand seals shifted rapidly once more. From the wild demon eye on his forehead, thin lines of blood began to seep out, while threads of gray energy swirled within. Faintly, a terrifying roar, like the cry of an ancient beast, echoed through the air, as if traveling through time and space. Wild demon eye, spirit of the wild beast.